Am I the asshole for being mad at my parents that they got my older brother a car for his 18th birthday and not on mine, and then causing the whole family to be up in arms about it till they came through? Plus 2-year new update. Original post. Okay, I know the title sounds like I'm spoiled, but hear me out. My brother, 20, got a car for his 18th birthday. Not a new car or anything, it was a 20-year-old Lexus that was in pretty good shape. And he rubbed it in my face for the rest of the time he was in senior year of high school. Compared with my brother, I get just as good grades as he does, better in some cases even. I worked my hardest in the hope of fairness. I even did some volunteering, cleaning up garbage in my local area. Then, my 18th birthday came and went a few weeks ago. The only thing I was hoping for was a car. I wasn't expecting anything like a new car or a sporty car, just something reliable like my brother got. The party wasn't anything like my brother's 18th. For his 18th, my mum baked the cake herself. It was a delicious layered chocolate pudding cake. I got a sheet cake from the supermarket. For his, they got a DJ. For mine, it was my dad's old boombox with a couple of mixed CDs. We went through the whole party and I figured my parents must just have been waiting to spring a surprise gift on me, but it didn't happen. I asked them, as things are wrapping up, why there was no car when my brother got one, and they said that they felt like he'd worked harder for it. I asked what he did that I didn't do, because I did all of that and more. My grandma was nearby and heard everything, and then she asked them why as well. She ended up lecturing my parents that she was very disappointed in them for showing favoritism. Then she proceeded to announce to everyone still there that my parents thought it fine to give their firstborn son a car and DJ, but not their second. And then she even pointed out how much harder my parents tried for my brother's 18th birthday than they had for mine. My uncle was the first to stand up and say something, then everyone else who'd not left yet. I ended up just walking away and going to my room to sit and think. I got a few I'm sorry calls from relatives, and my grandparents convinced me to go out with them for the evening. But when I got back, my parents were pissed and told me I'd shamed them to the whole family. I just walked past them because I didn't want to fight. The next few weeks went by with the silent treatment between us, but then a few days ago, my parents suddenly surprised me with a white 98 Subaru Legacy that runs great. They practically threw the keys and the title in an envelope at me and said, to have fun. I got the car, and they're paying for insurance for the next 6 months like they did for my brother. I know a car isn't really a right, but a privilege. So I feel like I've essentially blackmailed my parents into getting me one. Am I the arsehole for how all of this played out? My opinion for OP. I think you gave your parents the nudge they needed, OP, and their reaction shows they really do love you as much as your brother. Edit 1. I would like to clarify a few things. My parents make pretty good money and also don't go out of their way to live lavishly by choice. They've always been moderate in everything they buy or do. Though if anything is stretching their finances, it's my brother's college tuition. He's got a partial scholarship and my parents are paying the rest. I don't and never intended to ask for the same treatment on that. I want to work and pay my own student loans. Now that I have the car, I'm already looking into getting a part-time job. This isn't a gender thing, as I'm male like my brother. The bill of sale for the car I got says my parents pay $1,600 for it. My brother's car cost them about $3,000 plus, if I remember. But I don't see it as a money issue. I actually love the Subaru and told my parents so. They did not share my enthusiasm. I also did try to talk about a car with my parents a few times last year, but they always dodged the conversations around the topic. I figured if I talked about it too much, I'd ruin it, so I stopped. I would have felt like a brat to keep talking about getting an imaginary car, so I learned just to stay silent and hope. I can't go stay with my grandparents because they live in a 1-bedroom condo. There isn't enough room for other people. After all their kids grew up, my grandparents decided to downsize to make their eventual retirement easier. Also, my grandparents know all of the details already, and they tell me that I didn't do anything wrong, and were already planning on confronting my parents quietly over the car issue, but they took the chance to take care of the matter when they heard me asking my parents about it. As for my brother's 18th birthday party, It was held in 2020, during basically the height of the pandemic. Honestly, we shouldn't have had a big party like that at the time, but my parents insisted. As for my brother himself, he barely speaks to me, even before he left for college. He didn't show up for my 18th birthday party, and I figured that's just because he's busy with college. And he's not even in the same state as us anymore. Honestly, I haven't seen or heard from him since Christmas. And even then, the most I got out of him was a mild greeting. I did thank my parents for the car, enthusiastically thanked them even, but they've barely said a word to me after giving me the Subaru. And when I thanked my parents, they brushed me off and just went inside. It kind of gave off the vibe that they were letting a brat play with his new toy, which was pretty upsetting. And one of the reasons I made this post. Edit 2. There was one more thing I forgot to say. I was really hoping to get the car because I literally couldn't get a part-time job without one. We don't live in the city, and we're 10 miles from the nearest public bus stop. I've always had to get rides to go anywhere. Now that I have the Subaru, I intend to look for a part-time after-school job as soon as I can. Edit 3. Since it came up in so many messages, I want to clarify that when I went to talk to my parents after the party, it wasn't in front of the rest of the family. I intentionally spoke with them in another room and was supposed to be out of earshot of everyone else there. But my grandmother eavesdropped and then barged in to start lecturing my parents about their actions. And that's what caused the crapstorm to start. Now for the updates. Update 1. After not logging into this account for about 5 months, I've returned to share the rest of what happened before I start college. But first, I want to address some of the comments and messages I received on my previous post. Many people suggested that I return the car, claiming that I was spoiled, or that I shouldn't accept handouts from parents who are treating me so poorly. Let me clarify. I needed a car. Without one, there was no way for me to get a job. Given that I live more than 10 miles from the nearest bus stop, for those who still think I should have returned it, I urge you to understand that transportation was essential for my livelihood, especially in a place where public transport isn't accessible. Now, onto the main story. 3 weeks into working part-time after graduating, the Subaru I had been given broke down. The head gasket blew while I was on the highway, forcing me to pull over and call for help. My grandparents later discovered that someone had tried to patch the problem with gasket sealer, but it was a temporary fix at best. The car was essentially a ticking time bomb that finally went off. When confronted, my parents claimed they had no prior knowledge of the issue. However, their reaction was indifferent, merely shrugging it off and saying it was karma for making them buy me the car in the first place. This statement didn't sit well with my grandparents, who were present and furious, but my grandmother told me to leave the room while they handled the situation. After what felt like hours, I was called back into the living room. My parents were sitting on the couch looking utterly defeated. My uncle and 2 other relatives had arrived by then, and they were all clearly upset with my parents. It turned out that when my parents bought the car, they had simply looked for the cheapest option available, without bothering to inspect it or even read the ad thoroughly. The engine was essentially beyond repair, and it would have cost more to fix it than the car was worth. I had to call work and explain that I couldn't come in because my car was dead, and thankfully, they were understanding enough to put me on unpaid leave. What happened next was entirely orchestrated by my grandparents. They told me to stay out of it and let them handle everything. A few days later, they surprised me with a 1999 Honda Civic hatchback. Although it wasn't as fancy as a Subaru, it was reliable, with a list of recent repairs and a thorough inspection from my uncle, who knows a lot about cars. I was overwhelmed with gratitude, but my parents' reaction was starkly different. They looked completely defeated, barely saying anything before walking away. It was clear that they were now feeling the full weight of their actions. But the car was just one part of the equation. When I mentioned that I had done better in school than my brother, I wasn't exaggerating. My brother received a 30% scholarship, whereas I earned a 50% scholarship to a similarly reputable college that was even closer to home. My parents were visibly shocked, but once the initial surprise wore off, they looked more unhappy than anything. I decided not to press the issue, but my grandmother was not one to let things slide. She directly confronted my parents, asking them why they couldn't be happy for me. She even went so far as to question whether they had been hoping I would fail. My mother looked visibly upset, and my father couldn't meet my eyes. They both weakly claimed that they were happy for me, and even promised to help with my tuition, just as they were doing for my brother. My grandparents were quick to remind them that there should never have been any favoritism in the first place. Afterward, I couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was at play. So I asked my grandparents if they knew why my parents treated me the way they did. That's when they gave me the look that said, "It's time we told you the truth." I wasn't adopted as some had speculated, but I was unplanned, sort of. My parents had desperately wanted a girl after my brother was born, but when they had me, another boy, it was a crushing disappointment for them. They had been so convinced that I would be a girl that they had already brought a lot of baby items, specifically for a daughter. My grandparents told me that I ended up using all of my brother's hand-me-downs until I was 3 years old. Because my parents had invested so much in the idea of having a girl, in their eyes, I was a disappointment from the moment I was born. But that sentiment had clearly carried over into my upbringing. Since learning this, my parents have avoided discussing college with me as much as possible. They ignore the topic altogether, and this has only made me more cautious. I called my college to ensure that if anyone tried to impersonate me or sabotage my enrollment, they would double or even triple check with me before making any changes. Although I doubt my parents would go that far, it's better to be safe than sorry. One surprising development was my brother reaching out to me. He called me out the blue to apologize in his own way. He told me that our grandparents had filled him in on everything that had happened. He admitted that he plans to stay in the state where he's currently studying after he graduates, even though our parents want him to come back home. It seems he's as disillusioned with them as I am. Our conversation was awkward, given that we've never been particularly close, but it was a step towards mending our relationship. To celebrate my scholarship and graduation, my grandparents and other family members threw me a surprise party, almost identical to the one they had thrown for my brother's 18th birthday. There was a DJ, a huge chocolate cake, and plenty of family members congratulating me. My parents attended but were visibly uncomfortable, sitting quietly at a table in the corner sipping on beer. The look of defeat on their faces was even more pronounced than before. It was clear that the party wasn't just to celebrate my achievements, but also to show my parents the consequences of their favoritism. My grandmother even remarked that you're never too old to learn a lesson in humility. As for my life outside of family drama, I managed to turn my part-time job into a full-time position after high school, allowing me to build up some savings before I head off to college. The job isn't glamorous, and I'm earning minimum wage, but it's something. I plan to put in my best effort until I give my 2 weeks notice. I'm not sure if I'll be making another update after this. The negative comments on my original post were overwhelming, even though the majority were positive. Some people seem to have a personal vendetta against me, projecting their own issues onto my situation. While I appreciate constructive criticism, the outright hostility was mentally draining. I'm grateful for the support I received, but I'm ready to move on from this chapter of my life. Update 2. It's been 2 years since my last post, and I never expected to be back with another update, but here I am in 2024 with more to share. For those who remember my previous posts, I'm the guy whose parents were harshly called out by the family for their blatant favoritism towards my older brother. Things reached a boiling point on my 18th birthday, where my parents threw me a half-hearted celebration. In stark contrast to the extravagant party they had thrown for my brother during the pandemic, they even got him a car, something I didn't receive despite having better grades and earning a larger scholarship. To recap, when I asked my parents why my brother got a car and I didn't, they claimed it was because he worked harder for it. This was later proven false when I secured a 50% scholarship compared to his 30%. My grandmother, who overheard the conversation, wasted no time in getting the rest of the family involved. What followed was a full-blown intervention where multiple family members confronted my parents about their favoritism. My parents, trying to save face, eventually bought me a car, but even then, They treated me like a spoilt brat who didn't deserve it. Their car, a late 90s Subaru, turned out to be a lemon, with a blown head gasket that had been temporarily patched up. When it finally broke down, my parents showed little concern, calling it karma for pressuring them into buying it. As you can imagine, the family wasn't happy with this turn of events. They laid into my parents once again after the intervention, making it clear that their behaviour was unacceptable. By the end of it, my parents looked like scolded children, sitting there in stunned silence. They had been thoroughly humbled, but the damage had already been done. The trust and respect I once had for them was irreparably damaged. Over the past 2 years, I've been focusing on my studies and trying to move forward. My relationship with my parents remains strained, but I've managed to maintain a connection with my grandparents and other supportive family members. They've been my rock throughout all of this, always there to offer guidance and encouragement. One significant development is that I've grown closer to my brother. Although we were never particularly close growing up, the shared experience of dealing with our parents has brought us together in an unexpected way. We've had several heart-to-heart conversations, and he's expressed regret for how things played out. He's also made it clear that once he finishes college, he has no intention of returning home, much to our parents' dismay. They had hoped he would come back and continue the family legacy, but he's decided to carve his own path. I can't say I blame him. The toxic environment we grew up in isn't something either of us wants to revisit. As for me, I'm doing well academically and have found a supportive community at college. I'm working part-time to cover my expenses and have managed to save up enough to avoid taking out any more student loans. Life isn't perfect, but I'm in a much better place now than I was 2 years ago. One last thing, I recently found out that my parents have been attending therapy. My grandmother told me that they're finally beginning to understand the impact of their actions and are working to make amends. Whether or not they're ever fully reconciled with me remains to be seen, but it's a step in the right direction. To those who have followed my journey, thank you for your support and kind words. I'm not sure if I'll ever post again, but I wanted to share this update as a way of closing this chapter of my life. I'm moving forward, and I hope my parents are too. That's all for today. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video and share your thoughts in the comment section down below. Thank you.